The optional bevel ripping guide fits onto the Workcentre in exactly the same way that the rip fence does, and you always have it set at 90 degrees when fitting it and removing it. If you have the dust collection system fitted, take a sharp pointy object and slide this little strip back and then snap this little bridge in position there. That helps minimise the vibration of the bevel ripping guide when you're cutting very dense material. Now, double check that the gauge is set exactly at 90 degrees and push it up until it's just touching your saw blade. And try not to deflect the blade, just kiss lightly against the side of it, and then check the readings in both windows. I'm reading +3 millimeters in this window, about 2.5 in this one. That's pretty close. You don't have to be exactly the same, but try to make sure that you're reading pretty well the same numeral in both windows. Yeah, that's 2 and 2. And the blade spins gently, the teeth are just touching, that's perfect. Lock it at that position and take a note of the measurement and maybe make yourself another little label for future reference. Now, by loosening these knobs, you can angle the guide to any angle that you wish, down to 15 degrees from the horizontal. And the guide is designed so that these little V-grooves that you rest your work against are exactly flush with the left-hand side of your saw blade. So when you're ripping a board and putting 45-degree bevels on it, you can do a cut without reducing the width of the board itself. Next, back off the fence a little bit, replace the overhead guard, and allow room between the back of the blade and the overhead guard for the little intermediate bevel guide. Set it back up at your dimensions. It was +2 on this machine. Make sure that's locked. And +2. Okay, and now you can adjust the front bevel guide in so that the saw blade just enters into the slot, like so, and tighten it. And then as a double check, what you should do is make sure the power is disconnected and then spin the saw blade by hand to make sure it's not cutting into the guides. That's fine. Now, in use, the bevel guide is just like the Workcentre guide, except it gives you a full range of adjustment from 90 degrees down to 15 degrees. And it also gives you a very convenient slot for mounting the Series 2000 protractor. You can mount the slot in there so you can effortlessly cross-cut end grain pieces on an angle without clamping jigs and guides as you saw earlier. When bevel cutting average size workpieces, the hand positions are quite straightforward. With this hand, I'll be pushing the sheet down onto the bevel ripping guide face while my thumb rests along the top of the guide. This hand will be up out of the saw blade line, up here, just pushing straight forward, resisting any tendency to lift the sheet, the board, as I do the cut. Again, I'll be pressing down before the blade and after the blade, not opposite the blade. And that should give you a straight, step-free cut. Now I'd like to show you how you can handle a fairly large sheet. Now this one, at 1200mm long by about 650 wide and 12mm thick, is really about the limit that I'd attempt on the Workcentre. And to do it safely, I've set up a little outboard support here. I've got a Triton multi-stand. I've set the head at 45 degrees. I've clamped a long piece of wood in it using the built-in clamp on the multi-stand, and clamped to that piece of wood is another little block of scrap. Now I've set it up so that this is a straight piece of wood. A straight piece of wood sitting in that bottom guide on the bevel ripping guide is exactly in line with both this piece and this piece. And it mustn't rock this way or that way. That's fine. Check it again here, check it again there. Yep, that's exactly at 45 degrees and my block's in the right spot. These are basically just extending these two faces. So now you can hopefully effortlessly cut this piece down, because this looks after all the weight while you concentrate on keeping this edge flat down on the bevel ripping guide. Again, notice the hand positions. I'll be pushing down at the front and at the back, but not beside the saw blade. It's a perfect rip. There's a tiny little mark at the end, probably unavoidable given the size of the sheet. The only other way of doing this at 45 degrees would be to use a router, and you'll see more on that later. If during bevel ripping a large sheet like this you did get some curvature in the cut itself, then it's quite possibly due to bow in the sheet, either that way or that way. So it is very important when doing this sort of cut on a big piece like this that you concentrate on ironing out any bow in the sheet just before the saw blade, and this is a sort of cut that does lend itself to two people doing it together, one of them pushing the sheet through, the other one concentrating on keeping this flat down against the bevel ripping guide. Let's say you want to bevel rip a short workpiece. Well, you've got a different problem there, and that is that the piece is too short to give you good support before and after the cut, because it'll spend most of its time during the cut against the saw blade with fairly inadequate support front and rear. There is an easy solution. Make yourself up a little jig like this. This is just a bit of 6mm hardboard like masonite or plywood, and I've cut it to 39.5mm wide, and I've glued sandpaper on the face, and that just slides in this channel in the bevel ripping guide, and then I can use that to hold my workpiece against, so the sandpaper acts as your grip medium. If you've used 6mm material, the sandpaper will just be proud of the surface there. That's now your grip medium. This gives you the accurate linear control, and then you can very easily do the cut. And because of the sandpaper, there's no tendency for the wood to slide down the inclined face and rub against the side of the saw blade, giving you a perfect cut. Let's say you wanted to make your own handrail cappings with rainwater runoff both ways, or your own window or door sills. Well, you can use the bevel ripping guide for it, set at a pretty steep angle. I've selected 80 degrees in this instance. I'm just going to demonstrate on this piece of pine. You'll notice the safety guard's up very high. It has to be to get the wood in on edge. It's not terribly effective in dust collection at that height, so I'll be wearing my dust mask. And also, I've backed the bevel ripping guide away from the saw blade. I'm set at 30mm on the calibrated arms, 30mm at the front and 30 at the back, so this is parallel to my blade. And if I was cutting a longer piece, a proper bit of handrail capping, then quite clearly I'd have a Triton multi-stand out here giving me support, and probably another one at the other end, or having a friend help me to support a long, unwieldy workpiece. Otherwise, it's just a matter of doing two cuts. I don't know if you can see that, but that's perfect. The ridge is right in the middle of the piece, and it's given me a nice 10-degree runoff both ways. The bevel ripping guide adjusts all the way down to 15 degrees from the horizontal. We couldn't make it come down any further than that without compromising the rigidity of the construction. But if you need to do something which is shallower than 15 degrees, there is a way. You just attach a packer of the appropriate thickness to one edge of the workpiece. You can attach that by means of double-sided tape, hot melt glue, tacks up from underneath, countersunk so they don't scratch your paintwork. But as long as that's securely attached, then you can sit it on the work centre table up against the parallel fence, and the packer holds you at the correct angle, and then it's just simply a matter of running the work through. Make sure that the packer runs at least the full length of the workpiece to give you continuous support. And there we have our oblique angle.